Collins, you owe me big time for this one. I'm never going to forget this. Never. A day is going to come where I am going to ask you to watch something for me, and it's going to be just as demented as what you forced me to watch for this review. The Poughkeepsie tapes. This is a movie that is honestly one of the most disturbing movies I have ever watched in my life. I've seen a lot of horror movies. I've watched all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, all the Friday movies, all some of the Hellraiser movies. I've seen quite a few movies that would best be described as shocking. This this movie being the Poughkeepsie tapes made me feel genuinely like uneasy. I was gutted at the end of watching this. And really, I don't want to spoil anything, but the reason why it is so just emotionally draining is just number one, it's subject material, and number two, it's just how matter of fact and how real it all feels. The movie was directed by John Eric Dowdle, who would go on to direct movies like Quarantine, the American remake of Wreck, and As Above, So Below, as well as this weird Owen Wilson movie called No Escape, which I actually quite liked when it came out in 2015, but nobody remembers. Pierce Brosnan is also in that movie as well, but that's a side road. The Poughkeepsie tapes is basically a mockumentary about interviews conducted from cops, FBI agents, and various personnel talking about the Water Street Butcher. Basically, a very depraved individual who specifically preyed on women, and especially this one woman named Cheryl, who just is just honestly too demented even for words. I feel I feel like Roger Ebert after he watched Naked Lunch for the first time. I have to admire the craft of this, but at the same time, the material is so just depraved that I honestly can't recommend it. I mean, it's like the classic quote, I admire what he did and I hate it. Like John Eric Dowdle made a very effective found footage horror movie, and I low-key despise this movie for existing. I recommend it for the craft of it all, but I honestly can't recommend it to anyone because it will make you feel like shit afterwards. And not in the, oh, what does it all mean way. It just makes you feel like you've been through just a Homerian odyssey of pain. That's the best way that I can describe it. If you do watch this movie, I recommend not looking up any trailers or anything of the sort. Go into this completely blind like I did. That's the best way you're going to experience it if you do choose to go through this, which I don't, but I also do. It's very complicated. Other than Lake Mungo, there is not a horror movie that I've watched recently that just made me feel just awful after I watched it. Lake Mungo made me feel really sad. This movie made me feel angry, like genuinely angry. Not just for the victims, but for just everyone involved with this, because the Water Street Butcher is like playing chess while we're playing checkers in a weird roundabout way. He is so just mentally checked out of anything having to do with any soul or anything of the sort. He is just a monster. But what makes him such a monster is that he's a human being. He's not a serial killer wearing a hockey mask who spent several months down at the bottom of Crystal Lake. He is not a soldier who was possessed by a puzzle box and thrives purely on pain and suffering. He's a man. He could be anyone. And what's even more disturbing is what his job is in real life. And just if you put any thought into it whatsoever, It's like the scene in The Dark Knight where Michael Caine talks to Christian Bale about how there are some men in the world who can't be bought, they can't be reasoned with, they just want to watch the world burn. And that's the best way to describe the villain in this movie. He can't be reasoned with, he can't be sat down and said this is wrong. He just wants to watch the world burn. And that is why this movie is so compelling and also why it is so disturbing. I honestly can't give this a rating on my rating scale. So this is getting an unrated from me because it's one of those movies where I admire the craft very much. It's very much filmed like an HBO or a Netflix style crime documentary with the lower thirds. The I've heard some complaints that the performances in this movie are wooden, which I disagree with. They're very much presented like professionals trying to do their job, and in that context, they clearly succeed. But man, I hate this movie for just all of the subject material that it presents and how it is presented. If you are even genuinely curious, I do give it a recommendation. It's only 81 minutes long, but it's 81 of the most soul-crushing minutes you will ever experience. So, back to you, Jacob. I'm going to cry now.
Welcome to 3D Movie Cinema, the only show that's 3 dimensions away from the Poughkeepsie tapes being Ryan's favorite film. I'm your host 3D Jake, and today we're looking at the Poughkeepsie tapes, released in 2007. The Poughkeepsie tapes is a 2007 found footage mockumentary film directed by John Eric Dowell and written by John Eric Dowell and his brother Drew Dowell. The movie stars Stacey Chbosky Dowell and Ben Mesmer. The movie's essentially through the eyes of a serial killer. It's kind of like a found footage, kind of, it reminds me of 48 Hours type of documentary or cold case files. It's through like a found footage type of like, oh, the police are looking for a serial killer, but then you find the tapes, and the tapes is through the eyes of a serial killer who goes around killing people. Okay, and so I really felt like this was a really fucked up concept of a movie. Okay, like, this was something I was really dreading watching because I remember when I first saw this movie, and I really appreciate Ryan for doing that, watching this. And I know Ryan hated this movie. He's openly said, you saw his review, he hated this movie. Because this is kind of like, this is like, it feels like you're watching a snuff film, essentially. It makes you feel uncomfortable because essentially this is like the idea of a serial killer going on a killing spree, and you're watching this film of him killing people or doing horrific things to people. Like, literally, you see like a child in the yard and then he kidnaps a child and you're like, what the fuck, you know? Like, all of a sudden you see a child and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, what the fuck happened, you know? Like, oh my god. Or literally, he follows a woman to her house, follows this woman when her and her boyfriend go upstairs to have sex. Then all of a sudden he attacks them. The woman goes out and makes a run for it. Then he kidnaps her, kills the boyfriend, kidnaps her, and then makes her, like, tortures her psychologically. And you're just like, what the fuck? Takes her hands off and then makes her sit there like a mannequin and just, like, puts like Stockholm syndrome in her. Like, makes her call her master, and it's so fucked up. Like, I literally was like watching this going, this is a really fucked up movie. Like, this is a really fucked up movie because the idea, the whole entire movie, you're just watching him do horrific shit over and over, and it almost is like, like, it's like, this should be like a trailer narrator going, just say these words, it's only a movie, it's only a movie. Because, like, they used to have in the 70s trailers like that where you hear narrator go, it's only a movie. I feel like that should be this movie because it's so realistically shot to where I'm like, I feel like dirty watching this movie. I'm like, oh my god. Like, all of a sudden you see him do something horrific, you're like, oh god. Or like, there's a scene with Girl Scouts where they come into his house and you're like, oh god, please don't, please don't, please don't. And it just, you sit there and you feel disgusted because you're like, I hope the guy doesn't kill or do nothing to them. I hope he doesn't kill him. And then, you're like, but you're still knowing that there's something off about that scene. And then you find out what's off and you're like, oh no, oh no. Like, I'm just like, that to me, I'm like, there's not a lot of found footage movies that I would watch that go make me feel uncomfortable. Like, Quarantine doesn't make me, a wreck doesn't even make me feel uncomfortable. This is a movie that I really felt uncomfortable watching. Like, I watched this movie and went, yeah, especially in the third act of the movie, you're like, oh god, Like there's something so horrific that happens in the third act. You're just like me and Ryan texts me and goes, "All right, man, this is." He says, dude, I will never ever watch a movie like if you better tell me if a movie's like this is that messed up. From now on, we're setting a bar where it's like you have literally like Poughkeepsie tapes. He's like, you owe me big time. He's like, Poughkeepsie tapes is like a 10 of like this is the most fucked up thing I've ever seen because it is. It is a really messed up film. Like Poughkeepsie tapes is so messed up. It's so out there. It feels like these filmmakers are really like torture porn. Is the best way to describe it. This feels like torture porn in a way because you're literally making us suffer here, and it feels like they're getting off on this. Like literally, it's like, oh, push the boundaries, push the boundaries. I mean, these filmmakers are filmmakers, of course, who have made movies like As Above, So Below. They made the Quarantine movie, and they also made Escape, and they also made the Waco series. Oh man, they're literally messed up guys. Like they literally have a sick sense of humor when they make shit like this. Like I just remember watching this, going, "This is so messed up. This is so messed up. This is so messed up." I mean, they're good. It's not like this is terrible, but it's just like it's just really unsettling. It makes you. It's kind of like eating a sandwich, and then people tell you all the horrible stuff that happens to animals when you're eating that sandwich, and it just makes you feel disgusted. That's what it kind of reminds you. Like you're watching all these people suffer, and you're like from your amusement, and you're just like, I feel dirty because when I watch Friday 13th, I don't feel dirty. Like I'm like, okay, this is not real. I know Jason's not real. It's like about literally a deformed boy who comes back as an adult in a hockey mask and goes around killing people, and they kill him, and then he rises back up again in the next movie and kills more people. I know that's not real. I'm fine with that. I don't feel sorry about this because I know this isn't real. But this feels like the most realistic thing. This like I know Wes Craven said what makes Scream so bad is that what's so messed up is the thought of another human being. What makes another human being? Because Freddy and Jason are not real. You can tell those are fake, so you're not scared of Freddy or Jason. But what makes another person put on a costume and go and torture and kill another person? That's what makes Scream so scary is that there are psychopaths out there realistically that you could see easily putting a costume on and going around and murdering and kill somebody and torturing them. Like this movie is essentially. Imagine if they did Scream like this. This would be the most fucked up Scream movie ever. Because Scream is still fun because it's just someone in a costume, trying to kill Sidney Prescott, or Sam Carpenter. This is literally the opposite of that, where it's like, oh, Scream is like a preschool compared to this movie, to where you're watching someone commit horrific act and you never see this person's face. Only you see, I think you see him one time in a costume, and it's like so messed up to where I'm just like, please, I want this to end soon. It's 81 minutes, and like Ryan said, 81 minutes of terror. I feel like I'm watching an 81-minute snuff film, and I feel disgusted. I would never ever. And I watched this the first time I ever seen it was with my niece, and I had to turn it off because I'm like, I can't traumatize her like that. Like we went and watched something else because there's just so much shit in this movie. I remember revisiting it, watching it fully. I'm like, this is a very fucked up movie, and I guarantee you Ryan's gonna love this. I'm such a sadistic bastard for doing that. I mean, the reason why I made Ryan watch this movie because I'm like, listen, Ryan, he made me watch a movie called Lake Mungo, and I thought it was the most boring fucking movie ever, and he loved it, and I was like, he's like, it's so good. So I'm like, oh, you think that's good? Watch this. I'm gonna show you a movie. And I told him, go watch Poughkeepsie tapes. And so, Ryan, that is me getting back at you for making me watch Lake Mungo. You enjoy that, motherfucker. Enjoy it. Now I traumatized Ryan forever. Now he's like, I got him. I got you. But no, I'm seriously like literally. That's the reason why I chose this movie. Which I mean, I'm not a sadist or nothing. I would never choose something like Human Centipede or like a Siberian film. Which I don't think anyone in our community of YouTube has seen that movie. I don't even know who the hell's seen that movie. And trust me, I've heard of that movie. Do not ever Google that movie because that right the plot synopsis alone for that movie is fucked up. But yeah. So yeah, and on top of that, this movie, I would say it is literally shot like from its standpoint, it is shot well like a found footage movie. It's best way to describe it like Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project was a low budget film, and this was made before the quarantine, or this was made before like when found footage was started up. Like I think the Paranormal Activity had not yet come out, or was about to come out. I think at the time this came out first. Then I think Paranormal Activity come out, and I think that blew away, and then everything started coming found footage. And I will say, Paranormal Activity This movie I think was scarier than Paranormal Activity, but Paranormal Activity did stuff way better. And so I think Paranormal Activity is a better conceived film compared to this, where this one just feels like you are just literally watching a series of tape murders. And I think the one thing I had issues with was, okay, we're watching the mind of a serial killer. How about we let the serial killer, like, he's the perspective of the focus of the movie. So why don't we make the serial killer be the focus? Let's not try to, like, when you're interviewing other people, I feel like that was the problem. I'm like, look, can't we just have like opening narration or opening like titles that say, "Hey, look, these tapes were found," blah blah blah, and then all the interviews and stuff can be conceived of like the killer's watching this or something. Because I feel like if you're from a filmmaking standpoint, the perspective is the serial killer. Keep the focus on him. I feel like by you taking it off the serial killer, you're making the movie feel more like a movie, because this is essentially like snuff film that you're watching, and eventually you can't watch the snuff film if it takes you out of the snuff film. I'm just saying, like, that's what I had issue with from a filmmaking standpoint. Like, I'm watching this movie and I'm like, why is the serial killer not the focus? Why is he like, okay, he's the focus, but then we go to the talking to the interviewing people and family members and stuff. Wouldn't it be more messed up if we just keep the focus on the killer? He's the protagonist. He's the evil person. This the movie called the Poughkeepsie tapes. So why is it going away from the Poughkeepsie tapes to like 60-minute interview with someone else? I'm thinking that's what I feel like was the issue with that. And also I felt like some scenes was just it drags. I'm like, you should have edited that, but I understand they had 81 minutes to fill. And there were a few things like that I would have just said like, okay, this is I like this idea, but you need to like trim this a little bit or tweak this idea, okay? Or this scene does not need to. You're dragging the scene on a little bit too long. Like cut it down some. Other than that, there's a few minor issues with that, but I did like how it ended. Like in this dramatic way. Like, oh, the killer's still out there. Kind of reminded me of the town that dreaded sundown. Like, oh, the killer gets away with it. In a way, and that's an interesting concept of a movie. I really think in real life this shit would never happen, because the guy would get caught. Because obviously, like, there's a scene in the movie where I had an issue where he goes to like tell the mom, sorry for your last name. I'm like, who does that? The joke? Is he the fucking Joker or something? Like, I'm like, what world? What world would he like? Like, he's not a fucking YouTuber. Like, oh yo man, I just killed somebody. Watch this. I'm gonna go prank the mom. Watch. Sorry for your loss. Not. I was like, what? In what world? In what fucking world would someone do that? Because then all it is follow, like, hey, his plate. That's his license plate. Or they chase him and say, hey, stop him. They chase him fucking down, and then they get his plate. Then the cops arrest him an hour later. That's what would have happened in real life. Instead, like, he said that, and all of a sudden I was crying, and then he got away. And I'm like, yeah, because no one chased after you. Were just like, it's just like shit like that would never happen. Okay, I'm just saying. Like, so he would getting his ass beat on the floor. First off, he would never even make it back to his car, and then the cops would show up, arrest him. They'd find the woman a couple hours later. And then, she probably would still have the same results, but still, I would say, like, it would not play out differently. It wouldn't be like him getting on into the BDSM, snuff film territory. At least that part wouldn't get that far. And I'm just saying, that's what I have an issue with. But yeah, I really don't enjoy this movie, but I really like that this is a film made by first-time filmmakers that, wanted to make a horror film that's a love tribute to the Blair Witch Project, and, wanted to start like, hey, this is like a found footage, like, murder documentary style movie. And I appreciate that. So I got an A for effort on that. But as for a film, I feel like less is more sometimes, because you're showing way too much traumatizing. And I think from a horror perspective, you're doing your job. But I feel like some of this is too fucked up for a movie that, like, a mainstream audience would never ever. I don't see anyone saying this is my favorite movie. I never would see anyone saying that. Like, there's a lot of movies. I could see someone saying The Blair Witch Project is my favorite movie. But saying this movie, I feel like no one's going to say this, because it's too controversial of a subject matter that we kind of live through in real life, to where I don't feel like no one's going to say, yeah, I love this movie. So I feel like it doesn't have rewatchability, because once you see the movie, it's like you're not going to want to buy this on Blu-ray or DVD and say, oh, I want to watch this again. Instead, you're just going to say, yeah, this exists, and I'm glad it exists for its time, but I'm never going to pick this back up because it's just too dark of a subject matter, and I don't feel comfortable watching this again. But other than that, I think it's a movie that I give an A for effort for. But if I had to give this movie a grade, based on the movie itself, I would give it a B. Thank you so much.
Tapes.